for his well-presented speech. And one of the words that he hit on quite extensively was the word trust. And he spoke about it throughout his 20-minute speech quite extensively. And the reality is that Canadians throughout this country have lost the trust in this government. And part of what this government is trying to do is to basically distract people to truly understanding what it is. Because $400 million is not chump change. It's a lot of money, and it affects Canadians all throughout this country, and especially in his riding. And I'm wondering if the member would mind commenting again on how, in showing the fact that we're calling people out on this trust issue, it will bring that trust and faith and consistency back to Canadians.
The honourable member for Kootenay-Columbia, short answer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And trust is something that has to be earned. And that is what is not happening in this government today. You have to earn trust by your actions. When you're not accountable and you're not giving the unredacted documents that we've asked for this $400 million, that is telling Canadians that you don't care. That you, where is it? Why are they not unredacted? What's happened to our government when they're not producing those documents? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member will have 6 minutes after oral questions to continue with the questions and comments. Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. The honourable member for Nepean.
On behalf of Shia Muslims across Canada, I condemn the recent deadly attack in Pakistan. On November 21st, gunmen ambushed convoys of Shia Muslims in Kurram district, killing at least 38 individuals, including women and children. Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims generally coexist peacefully in Pakistan. However, militant groups like Deobandi militant groups, Salafi extremist groups affiliated to Islamic State, Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, Barelvi group, Tehreek-e-Labaik Pakistan indulge in the killings of Shia Muslims in Pakistan. Motivated by sectarian ideologies, these groups are responsible for numerous brutal incidents in recent years. They operate almost freely due to the absence of political will to prosecute them. I call on Canada to condemn the killings and convey to Pakistan the deep concerns of Shia Muslims across Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Dauphin Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize the incredible and ongoing contributions of Ken and Christine Waddell. Ken and Christine Waddell have spent their entire career working to promote local journalism. 57 years ago, they began publishing career together at the University of Manitoba. They would go on to spend their personal and professional lives owning and operating many local publishing companies, providing a valuable local lens for their communities. This includes 35 years of the Neepawa Banner and Press, 32 years with the Rivers Banner, and of this year, the new owners of the Verdun Empire Advance. But their contributions don't stop at publishing business. They are both actively engaged in their community of Neepawa. Ken has volunteered much of his time with the Neepawa Titans hockey team, and Christine has volunteered much of her time to the Tangled Threads Quilt Club and Neepawa Rotary Club. On behalf of the House of Commons, I want to thank them for being the pillars in their community and for giving a voice of rural Canadians for so many years. Our country is a much better place because of them.
Yay! Way to go, Dan.
L'honorable député, the honourable member from Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to call attention to the cluster of progressive neurological symptoms of unknown etiology in New Brunswick. The people of my beautiful province need our help, and it is long past time we acknowledge the patients and their families who have been fighting this battle for years, who deserve answers, who deserve action, and who deserve a diagnosis so we can begin to treat, to improve the quality of life and save lives. To all the heroes who have been shouting from the rooftops when no one was listening, all of New Brunswick owes you a debt of gratitude, and we must come together now to get to the bottom of this unsettling situation. When the first cases began and the alarm was raised, too often those in power, a position of power, chose to look away, chose to avoid drawing attention to the matter by downplaying and detracting. Mr. Speaker, New Brunswick matters. Our health matters. We don't know yet what is causing the devastating and rapid onset of symptoms that patients are experiencing, and we don't know why those living in the Acadian Peninsula, Indigenous and young people under 45 are amongst the most afflicted. But we owe it to them to find out. I call on our government to be there, to work with experts and provincial partners to finally end the suffering and the silence.
L'honorable député de Rivière.
The honourable member for Rivière du Nord. Mr. Speaker, Adil Shakawi invited the crowd to pray for the annihilation of Israel. Cars were burned. Store windows were broken. Increasingly, we are seeing violence at Montreal protests. And it's increasingly clear what the target of this violence is: Quebec's Jewish community. Someone like Erwin Kotler, a human rights activist, has been threatened and is under police protection in Quebec. Meanwhile, people are firing on synagogues. And people are being threatened and harassed just because they're Jewish. This is unacceptable. People have a right to protest. People have a right to support Gaza in its conflict with Israel. We all are deeply concerned about the fate of the Gazans. We have seen how women and children are suffering in the Gaza Strip, and we want the war there to end. But these acts of anti-Semitism are shameful for pro-Palestinians and for Quebec. It needs to end.
L'honorable député d'Argenteuil, la Petite Nation.
Mr. Speaker, for 11 years, the Fairmont Le Chateau Montebello has been organizing an amazing holiday tree decoration activity called Trees of Hope. It's in the beautiful chateau, and these trees, Christmas trees, are sponsored and decorated by generous businesses from the region who give the money to the local food bank. I was very pleased with my daughters to decorate one of these Trees of Hope this year. We used the colors and symbols of our beautiful country to decorate the Christmas tree. I would invite everyone to go admire the Trees of Hope, which will be exhibited throughout the holiday period. Choose your favorite and be generous to the Petite Nation Food Bank, which is on the first lines of helping the most vulnerable members of our communities. I'd like to thank Le Chateau Montebello for its incredible initiative.
The honourable member from South Shore St. Margaret's.
Tomorrow is dumping day. No, not another Liberal cabinet shuffle. Tomorrow, in lobster fishing area 33 and 34, almost 2,000 fishing boats from Prospect Bay to New Harbour, from Lunenburg to Liverpool, Cape Sable Island, Shag Harbour, St. Mary's Bay and Digby will set out before dawn to dump up to 400 lobster traps per boat into the deep, briny sea. Tomorrow, legal fishermen will be fishing the best lobster in the world, the most important fishery in Nova Scotia, from the edge of the shore out to 80 miles in the North Atlantic from now until May. Waves crashing over them in storms and sunny days to catch the food we eat, the most dangerous fishery in the world. So my wish is this, for these lobster harvesters, that these seas be calm and that the lobsters be crawling. May the fishing grounds be prosperous, making long days seem short. May the shore prices and markets be steady, and may the thoughts of loved ones and family guide you safely back to port each day of the season.
The honourable member from London North Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today, as you know, marks the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. This is a scourge that continues to afflict our communities, my community of London and communities across the country. It is, of course, incumbent on all governments to lead the charge against it, but alongside us and on the ground we have outstanding not-for-profit organizations carrying out the work. One example is the London Abused Women's Centre. This organization tirelessly devotes itself to the cause. In fact, in 2010, it began the Shine the Light campaign, a campaign that sees every night businesses and other organizations in our community put the light purple, so that illuminates the sign of this campaign so that we can see more action against the scourge that is violence against women, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, the effort has continued. It's gone beyond. Tonight, the Peace Tower will be lit in purple. It's international as well, Mr. Speaker. There's much more to do, but because of organizations like LOC, we have the hope.
The honourable member from Hamilton Mountain.
On the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women, I'm thinking about all the women suffering from abuse that I met during my journalism career and all the families I got to know covering criminal cases caused by femicide. And gender-based violence doesn't stop at physical harm. It includes psychological and economic manipulation, which also have devastating effects that perpetuate cycles of violence and endure for generations. all of us have a responsibility to reflect on this, particularly men and boys. We heard this recently at a Status of Women committee hearing. Attitudes and behaviors that objectify and belittle women create a culture of violence. Hashtags like men going their own way, used by the Leader of the Opposition in his videos, further entrench violent attitudes in our society. These are not new issues, Speaker, but for the first time we have a government actually doing something about it, a national action plan to end gender-based violence. It's not everything we have to do, but it's a strong start, and on this side of the House we will not relent until every woman is safe.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to congratulate Laval University's Rouge et Or football team. They won the 59th Vanier Cup. Once again, they have shown that they are a real powerhouse of Canadian university football. This is the 12th time they've won the cup. They have shown that success rests on strategy, teamwork, and resilience. The team's performance was stunning. They managed to win at the national finals. That's something that will be remembered forever in the history of this sport in Canada. Every member of the team, coach, and staff member can be proud of this remarkable accomplishment. They're inspiring people, and they're a source of pride for the University, for Quebec, and for all those who believe in the importance of hard work and team spirit. I hope they will always continue to exceed the bar that they've set. You are a real dynasty of university football. Congratulations.
The Honourable Member from Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, today is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and the first day of the 16 days of action against gender-based violence. Violence against women is one of the most prevalent and pervasive human rights violations in the world and disproportionately impacts women from minority groups. I'm proud of our government's work to fight gender-based violence at home and abroad, including the 10-year action plan to end gender-based violence here in Canada, the inquiry into missing murdered Indigenous women and girls, standing up for women internationally, like the Zindagi Azadi movement in Iran and for the women of Afghanistan. Our government has supported women's groups across Canada, including the York Region Women's Foundation in my riding. On this side, we support frontline organizations that protect women and educate young people, including young men, about the need to have healthy relationships. These are all programs the Conservatives cut under Harper and will cut again if they get the chance. Violence against women is not only a women's issue, it is a societal issue that we should all come together and act now to end. Let's eliminate gender-based violence, not the programs that fight against it. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Mission Mashpee, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP are a bunch of sellouts, despite the leader of the NDP's media stunt where he ripped up the coalition deal and said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. He continues to prop up the Prime Minister and his failed caucus. The leader of the NDP voted for the carbon tax over 24 times, pushing Canadians to food banks in record-smashing numbers with over 2 million visits in a single month. The leader of the NDP supports soft-on-crime policies and hard drug legalization that have led to a 50% increase in violent crime, causing chaos, death, and destruction. The NDP have supported housing and fiscal policies that have driven an entire generation out of home ownership, leaving young people hopeless about their future. And every day the Prime Minister remains in power, it is because the NDP keep him there. Let's call a carbon tax election now. Let's bring some common sense back to Canada.
The Honourable Member from Lloydminster, Battleford.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, life has never been more expensive for Canadians. Grocery prices have skyrocketed and Canadians are struggling to feed their families. Record numbers of Canadians are being forced to rely on food banks to survive, and many food banks are running out of food. Now, food insecurity has reached such alarming levels that 27 cases of scurvy have been identified in northern Saskatchewan. The patients all had one thing in common: a lack of nutritious food. This should not be happening in Canada, but this is the shameful record of this Prime Minister. Unfortunately, the worst is yet to come. This costly NDP Liberal coalition is hell-bent on quadrupling the carbon tax, which will only make everything more expensive. Canadians deserve access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food. Only common-sense Conservatives will bring home lower prices by axing the tax on groceries permanently.
The Honourable Member for Nickel Belt. Mr. Speaker, last week our government followed up on its promise to bring more money back to Canadians' pockets. Thanks to a tax holiday for everyone and the new Canada Workers rebate, we are ensuring that families can save, and we are helping workers succeed. And what has the answer of the insulting Conservative leader been? He's making all of the MPs in his caucus shut up, and Conservatives are ready to cut essential services like childcare, healthcare, and pensions. Canadians deserve much better than what the Conservatives are proposing. This is a perfect example of the way that our government is ensuring that workers and families will be able to buy what they need and save for whatever they'd like to buy in the future. And I hope that all members in this House will support this hard work to reduce costs for people in Nickel Belt and all Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, today on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, the NDP stand in solidarity with women, girls, and gender-diverse people facing violence in our communities and around the world. Globally, nearly 1 in 3 women have faced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime, and every day 140 women and girls are killed by family members. From Afghanistan to Ukraine, from Gaza to Sudan, the realities of war disproportionately devastate women, robbing them of safety, dignity, and opportunity. Canada must do more. A feminist foreign policy means committing to peacekeeping, supporting survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, and ensuring women are at the forefront of conflict resolution and recovery. Violence against women is not inevitable. It is a choice that we can work to end together. We must act boldly and compassionately for a world where everyone is free from violence and fear.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, Quebec City is a city of champions. Laval University's Rouge et Or team won the Vanier Cup for the 12th time, which means that they are the team to have won it the most in all of Canada. Felipe Forteza had an extraordinary performance throughout the game. He scored 18 out of 22 points to win the game. I would also like to mention Glenn Constantin, the chief coach. He's a real legend of Quebec football. His players were ignored when the league made its individual awards, but they had their revenge because, as the head coach says, they won the only trophy that no one has to vote for. This team has an excellent program for training players, the best in Quebec and Canada. I'd like to congratulate everyone involved in making this win possible. You are all champions.
The Honourable Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
The Prime Minister dances while Montreal burns. Over the weekend, Montreal was attacked by a vicious anti-Semitic mob. They attacked police, lit vehicles on fire, and bashed in windows while the Prime Minister was busy dancing at a Taylor Swift concert. This is what we get from a Prime Minister who for 9 years has divided Canadians. He divided us by race, by religion, by region, age, and wealth. He's opened our borders to criminals and terrorists who attack law-abiding Canadian citizens. The result? Fire bombings of synagogues, extremists attacking mandirs and gurdwaras. Over 100 churches burned and vandalized. Hate crime up 251%. And when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism, Second Cup has more chutzpah than this weak Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Canadians need an election now so Conservatives can restore our values, our freedoms, and law and order in this country.
The honourable member from Cape Breton, Canso.
Mr. Speaker, let me take the opportunity today to talk about something that will make a real difference in the lives of my constituents. Starting December 14th, we're giving a tax break to all Canadians, along with a new working Canadians rebate, which will be delivered starting in early spring 2025. With new tax relief on groceries and seasonal expenses and a rebate for working Canadians, we are reducing costs when they're their highest for Canadians. These measures will build on the government's work to ensure Canadians keep more money, more of their hard-earned money in their pockets. From introducing $10 a day daycare to tax breaks for the middle class and small businesses, we've consistently targeted solutions that put money in the Canadians' pockets. But let's not forget, Mr. Speaker, one thing. The Conservatives want to cut these programs, and they want to make Canadians pay for more out of their own pocket. Instead of offering solutions to Canadians like we are doing on this side, they continue to focus on empty, empty, empty slogans. Yes.
Questions orales, oral questions. We're going to have
the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The protests, the violent protests in Montreal are the consequence of a Prime Minister who, for 9 years, has promoted woke, toxic, divisive identity politics that divides Canadians according to race, sex, vaccination status, etc. And along with dividing Canadians, he's erasing our history. He's allowing terrorists and criminals to come into our country. What's the result? 251 more hate crimes. When will he allow us to have an election so that we can fix what he has broken? The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, and let me be very clear. What was on display in Montreal just this past weekend was criminality. The violence, the hatred, and the anti-Semitism that took place in Montreal is completely unacceptable, and everyone in this House must condemn it in the strongest possible terms.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The lawless hate riot that we saw in the streets of Montreal is what happens after 9 years of a woke Prime Minister pushing radical woke identity politics, dividing people by race, gender, vaccine status, religion, and more. On top of dividing, he erases our heroes and history, saying Canada has no core identity. He opened the borders to terrorists and lawbreakers. The results? Assassinations on Canadian soil, firebombings and terrorist attacks against places of worship, 251% more hate crime. It wasn't like this before this Prime Minister and won't be after he's gone. Why not an election so we can fix what he broke?
the Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I personally believe that it is shameful that anyone would speak of the violence that took place on our streets here in Canada in political terms for purely partisan political intention. Mr. Speaker, I believe it is all of our responsibility to stand up to such hatred and to condemn it in the strongest possible terms, unequivocally and on behalf of all decent Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister, he's doubled the cost of housing and increased the cost of food 37% more quickly in Canada than in the United States. And now he's trying to hide that. He's saying that, you might save 10 cents on a bag of chips, or you might be able to save on Halloween costumes after Halloween's already over, Mr. Speaker. So what has the Bloc got for keeping this Prime Minister in power? Nothing. Nothing for seniors. The leader of the Bloc Québécois, he speaks a big game, but he doesn't play a big game. Why not a carbon tax election so we can get rid of taxes and help people save real money? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, today we can really wonder who talks a lot and who does a lot, because today every member of this House has the right, the obligation to help Canadians, Quebecers, with a bit of help. So my question is, will the Conservative members have the right to vote for their constituents? The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
After doubling housing costs and inflating food prices 37% faster in Canada than in the United States, with inflationary carbon taxes and deficit spending, the Prime Minister now has a tiny 2-month tax trick that will save you 10 cents on a pack of chips, save you a few pennies on a Christmas tree, but only after your Christmas tree is already up and decorated. You'll even save on Halloween costumes 2 months after Halloween. Does he really expect Canadians to fall for this tiny tax trick just before he quadruples the carbon tax on heat, homes, gas, and groceries?
Carbon tax goes up in April.
Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm really glad the Leader of the Opposition started by comparing our economic position with the U.S. Because the fact is, in Canada, inflation is lower. In Canada, interest rates are lower. In Canada, deficits are lower. And in Canada, the public debt is lower. Let's stop talking Canada down. And when it comes to supporting Canadians, what I want to know is, will Conservative MPs be allowed to offer a tax break to their constituents? I know their constituents want it. That's what we're hearing from everyone.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this from a minister who, after finding out that the economy is entering its 6th consecutive quarter of shrinking per capita GDP, that's income per person, down, while the American income per person is up. After she learned that there are 2 million people lined up at food banks, 38% more chronic homelessness, 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario after 9 years of this government. She says we're not in a recession, we're in a vibe session, she says. So what's her message to people who are hungry and homeless after 9 years of her government? They just need to get with the vibe?
Exactly.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, my message to the Leader of the Conservatives is to be a little more economically literate. I guess he didn't look at the recent GDP revisions, the upward revisions in GDP that show a good result for Canada in per capita GDP. They also show that Canada has not had a recession, contrary to the predictions of many when we saw the COVID recession. We have had a soft landing. That's something to celebrate.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, allow me to remind you that the Bloc Québécois' useless measures, apparently, when it came to supply management and seniors, well, the young man who leads the Conservative Party, he voted in favour of those. However, when it comes to purchasing power in Quebec and Canada, there are measures that have been proposed, and there are measures that are going to be accessible to millionaires, and checks are going to be sent to people who, have high revenue, $150,000. Does the government not realize that it's abandoning those who really need help with these measures? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I take the Bloc Québécois' concerns very seriously when it comes to our seniors, and I take them seriously because our government shares those concerns. That is why our government has supported seniors across Canada more than any other federal government. This year, Canadian seniors will get $48 billion in support from the federal government. And that's fair because they deserve it. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the calculation that you have to make is the one that people are making at home. those who are between 65 and 74 years old in particular, whose purchasing power has not gotten any better for years now, and who are subject to discrimination and who don't have access to the vote-buying checks coming from the Liberal government. But listen, I don't understand how the Liberals supported the NDP to support them on this. I'd like to know how. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to start by clarifying one detail, and that's that I know that there are many seniors who are still working, and those who work will get the checks. I also want to say that I think that we all understand that seniors who are 75 years old and older are more vulnerable. They need more assistance, and that is why our government knows that we need to give them more support.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
You know what's cruel? The $250 check that's going out in spring, this Liberal government is excluding seniors, people living with disabilities, and people who just started working. What a slap in the face. Why is this Liberal government excluding the most vulnerable in our country?
You are a slap in the
For
face,
the Honourable
man.
Minister response, just going to ask members, please, to not take the floor unless they're recognized, so that everyone can hear the question. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the NDP leader for his question, and I hope he and all members of this House will help work with us to unblock this Parliament and to get the support to Canadians that they need and deserve. When it comes to the Working Canadians rebate, we know that there are hardworking people across the country who have been through challenging times, and we know that now is the time to provide them with that extra support. I hope all MPs will join us in doing that.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Workers desperately need help, like seniors, persons with disabilities, and young people who've just got their first job. And yet this government is excluding them from the $250 payment. This is a slap in the face. Can the Liberals explain to the most vulnerable Canadians why they're not supporting them? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to thank the Leader of the NDP for his question. And I hope that he and all members of this House will help us sincerely help Canadians. Our government understands the importance of supporting the most vulnerable, and that's what we've done starting in 2015, and we will continue to do that. Today, we understand that Canada's workers need help, and we are going to help them. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The NDP leader is giving Canadians whiplash with his latest flip-flop and the flop on the flip. First, he said he tore up his deal with the Liberal government. Then he said that he had taped it back together because they had signed on to his 2-month tax trick. Now he rises on his feet to say that the trick is a ripoff of seniors and persons with disabilities. So then why won't he put his actions where his words are and vote for a carbon tax election so Canadians can choose between this 2-month trick and axing the tax for good?
It will be of no surprise I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from New Westminster Burnaby, please, not to take the floor unless recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the only inconstant flip-flopper in this House is the Leader of the Official Opposition. For months, he has been talking about how Canadians need a little more support. But it turns out that unless you recite robotically his Dr. Seuss rhymes, he's not going to agree with your approach to helping Canadians. Now is the chance for him and his MPs to actually give Canadians some real support. Let's get together.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Speaker, the streets of a major Canadian city were set on fire this weekend, and the Prime Minister was nowhere to be found. A radical, anti-Semitic, anti-Canadian mob burned cars, smashed windows, assaulted police officers, and the Prime Minister was nowhere to be found. It took him until noon the next day, and he offered the most basic platitudes resembling some standard condemnation that he's been offering after fomenting the hatred that he's now surprised about. So I have one question. When was the Prime Minister told about the riot, and why did he decide to keep dancing the night away?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague, the Minister of Defence, I think properly explained the outrage that all Canadians felt at this wanton, reckless violence on the streets of Montreal. Mr. Speaker, we condemn unequivocally the rising and concerning rates of anti-Semitism and all other hate crimes in the country. We're working with provincial authorities, local police to combat this. And let me be very clear, Mr. Speaker, no matter what group you claim to represent or what cause you're advancing, if you're smashing windows and assaulting Canadians, you're a criminal and you'll face the full consequences of the law.
Again, I'm going to ask the member from Calgary. I'm going to ask the member from Calgary, Signal Hill, please not to take the floor unless recognized by the chair.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. The pictures from the riots in Montreal have gone around the world, and it's shameful. We are reaping what the Prime Minister has sowed with his woke, divisive policies. He divided people by race, gender, religion, region, age, wealth, and so on and so forth. And as a result, we've lost control of our borders. We've let criminals come into Canada. Chaos has come in with them. Why is the Prime Minister dancing while Montreal burns? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I'll say again in French what I've just said in English. Our government, in every instance, condemns the acts of violence and the criminal acts that we saw on the streets of Montreal. It's completely unacceptable to put forward a political point of view by destroying Canadians' property, by committing assault, by attacking police officers. You're not demonstrating peacefully. In those cases, you are a criminal and you'll face justice. The honourable member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. And yet, Mr. Speaker, for this Prime Minister, it's not enough that Hamas representatives are burning our city senators. He's opened our borders to terrorists and criminals, and he's called anyone who's questioned his policies a racist. Despite the Conservatives' demands to put the Islamic Revolutionary Guard on the list of terrorist entities, he's let them operate legally here for years, and now he's letting Hamas representatives destroy our cities. Why did the Prime Minister choose to dance when he knew that Montreal was burning? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, the RCMP is continuing to work in close cooperation with the good work that was done by the police service in Montreal. At all times, the RCMP supports its partners, whether that be in Montreal or in other regions of the country. We have criticized, and we will continue to criticize, the increase of anti-Semitic acts and hate speech acts in Canada, and we will remain focused on the support that we can give the forces of law and order, something that the Conservatives can't say.
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, for years, these Liberals have engaged in woke virtue signaling. They have promoted a hollow and superficial understanding of morality, more concerned with appearances than doing what's right. And Canadians clearly saw the consequences of Liberal ideology over the weekend in Montreal when hate-fueled attacks overtook the cities. The Prime Minister is partying while Canadian cities are suffering. So I ask, why was the Prime Minister dancing while Montreal was burning?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for that question because all Canadians in this House and all Canadians around the country detest and render unacceptable what we saw in the streets of Montreal. That kind of violence, that kind of unlawful behaviour, that kind of anti-Semitism is unacceptable and will never be countenanced. While we're talking about the fight against anti-Semitism, I will just put it to that member that we have legislation on the floor of this chamber that will take the ban on willful promotion of anti-Semitism and accentuate the penalties, taking them from 2 to 5 years. Will the member support that bill? It's called Bill C-63. It targets online radicalization, which is the root cause of what we're seeing.
The Honourable Member for Durham.
This Liberal Justice Minister, just like his boss, the Prime Minister, refuses to take any responsibility for creating the conditions that led to what we saw in Montreal just a couple of days ago. It's this Liberal Justice Minister's DEI criminal justice policies that have allowed crime to go unchecked in our cities. It's this Liberal Justice Minister that won't lift a finger to do anything about the violence targeting religious communities in Canada. The Prime Minister is the problem. The Liberal Justice Minister is the problem. So I ask again, when will the Prime Minister stop dancing and address crime in our cities?
Great question. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I reject that out of hand. What I would say on this side of the House is that what we are doing is we are working to ease tensions in our communities. We are looking at the statistics on hate crimes. We're seeking to address them. What is the proof positive? When I announced the Bill C-63 in this chamber, who was standing by my side, Mr. Speaker? The people that were standing by my side included the Centre for Jewish and Israeli Affairs. Why? Because they know you don't get a Pittsburgh Tree of Life synagogue attack unless you're radicalized online. Radicalization online is causing anti-Semitism. It is what we will combat through this bill, through every measure on this side of the House.
It's the internet.
Before I give the floor to the Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly, I would like to...
Members, especially colleagues, I'd like to remind members, including the member from Durham who had asked the question, to please not take the floor to listen to the answer that he had just asked.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I was going to ask the Minister of Finance what went through her head when it came to giving tax breaks to people who in theory could be millionaires, or $250 checks to people who are making $150,000. But here I'm struck. Is it possible that they're taking us out on for a ride and that the government doesn't actually have the support of the NDP? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I sincerely hope that we will have the support of every member of this House, because I know that there are things that divide us, but I think that all of us believes that we need to support the middle class across the country. So yes, I hope that the NDP will vote in favour of these measures. I also hope that the Bloc will vote in favour of them, and I hope that our colleagues from the Conservative Party will vote in favour as well. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. If the minister wants the support of people who have a certain conscience for social justice, and that does exclude some people in this House, why is the discussion of our bill to help seniors that they voted in favour of been dropped, and why are they not lowering the cap for those who are getting the checks to help those who really deserve it get it? You know, seniors. Why aren't they doing that? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we agree with the leader of the Bloc Québécois and with all members of this House who believe that we need to help the most vulnerable, who think that we need to help our seniors. We completely agree on that. And that's why our government has added a considerable amount of money in support for our most vulnerable seniors. That's the right thing to do, and that's what we've done. The Honourable Member for Shefford. The federal government is letting retirees down, according to the FADUC. They've already denounced the Liberals' refusal to offer fair old age pensions to all seniors. And now they're furious to see them handing out $250 checks to just about anybody who's earning taxable income up to $150,000 a year, except for retirees. Not a penny for them. Not even for those who depend on the guaranteed income supplement that Liberals, had promised to increase. So the Liberals promised to help less affluent retirees. How can they so ridiculously abandon them now? It's shameful. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two things. First of all, no federal government has ever done more for seniors than this Liberal government since 2015. And that's one of the reasons why the poverty rate for seniors has gone down by 20% since 2015. Second, if we had listened to the Conservatives, who unfortunately are often supported by the Bloc Québécois, we wouldn't have lowered the OAS threshold level to 65 years old. That would mean that there'd be 100,000 seniors in Canada, including many in Quebec, who would be in poverty right now, Mr. Speaker, if we'd listened to them.
The Honourable Member from Cumberland-Colchester.
The word cacistocracy translated means government by the worst, most incompetent or most unscrupulous citizens. I can't think of a better description for this NDP Liberal government. There have been 27 reported cases of scurvy in Saskatchewan, and the Salvation Army has reported that over 1/4 of parents are skipping meals so their children can eat. Canadians are malnourished and suffering, and what do we get from this government? A quadrupling of the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. When will the Prime Minister finally show some courage and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, it's a shame that members would speak to each other in that kind of way. I believe that every member within their heart is here because they wish to serve their communities. And I take a look at Canada, which the average number of years the Canadians spend in health is 6 years longer than the United States, 2 years longer than the United Kingdom, 1 year longer than France and Italy. We have the second highest only to Japan. The model they would choose would be to push us deeper into mal health and attack our health system. Mr. Speaker, that's not a direction we will follow.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member from Cumberland-Colchester.
Speaker, under that Liberal minister, 7 million Canadians don't have access to primary care, and malnutrition mayhem reigns supreme. 2 million Canadians visiting food banks, 40,000 of them being Nova Scotian, and of those 12,000 being children. And scurvy. Can it get any worse, Mr. Speaker? And how does this NDP Liberal reunited costly coalition think they're going to address food bank use and scurvy? Well, of course, as I mentioned, they want to quadruple the carbon tax. I'll ask again, when will the Prime Minister let Canadians decide if they want the madness to continue, and will they call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, their solution to food insecurity would be to take away a rebate check that they get to give them more money in their pocket to be able to afford the necessities of life. Their solution to food insecurity would be to cut a school food program that makes sure that kids get the food they need. They would cut dental care. The reality is, I sat in opposition and I watched the Conservative Party when they were in government. I'll tell you, at that period of time, the amount of action they took for vulnerable people was exactly zero. So for now they're talking about what vulnerable people need, but they're not putting forward any solutions to actually help them.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, the cost of living crisis is having a major impact on family grocery budgets. Yet the Liberal answer is to continue hiking the carbon tax, making food even more expensive. Under NDP Liberals, we're seeing the largest annual increase in child poverty on record. 1 in 4 parents are cutting back their food to feed their kids, and 1 in 5 children are now living in poverty due to the NDP Liberals government. That's nearly 1.4 million children. Enough is enough. Will the Prime Minister give Canadians a choice and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I have a great deal of respect for the MP from Fort McMurray, and that's why I'd like to ask her and all of her colleagues, who I believe sincerely do care about Canadian families, to join us in supporting Canadian families. And here's how they can do it. Vote for a GST rebate over the holidays. That would mean no GST on diapers, no GST on kids' clothes, no GST on that prepared food, maybe rotisserie chicken, that a hardworking mom wants to pick up after work to feed her kids. That is real support we can all deliver in a couple of weeks.
The Honourable Member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Seniors and persons with disabilities are hardest hit by rising costs driven by unchecked corporate greed because they live on fixed incomes and already struggle to pay for medication and groceries. Yet the Liberals excluded them from their planned $250 rebate. We know Conservatives cut supports Canadians need, and these Liberals always let people down. Will the government get real, reverse this cruel and callous decision, and ensure seniors and persons with disabilities also get the relief they need?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Labour and Seniors.
Thank you, Speaker. This government has done more for seniors than any other government. First thing that we did was roll back the retirement age from 67 to 65, taking 100,000 seniors out of poverty. We increased the GIS by $1,000, taking nearly 1 million seniors out of poverty. We increased the OAS for the most vulnerable seniors. And yes, we are doing a tax break for all Canadians, including seniors. So I ask everyone in this House to stand up for seniors and to vote for our tax breaks for all Canadians.
Order. The Honourable Member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have failed to deliver on their $10 a day childcare by allowing provinces to continue to pay childcare workers inadequate wages, causing labour shortages and long wait lists for families. A recent report by the Centre for Future Work has said that $10 a day childcare improves affordability for families and has allowed more women to return to work. What's stalling it? The Liberals won't put in place a workforce strategy. Will the government answer their calls, put in place a workforce strategy, and give childcare centres and workers the support they need?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, since rolling out the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system, we've seen over 1 million children benefit from this affordable care. But as this member points out, more work needs to be done to ensure that the workforce is well supported. Later this week, I'll have the opportunity to meet with all ministers responsible for early learning and childcare at the provincial and territorial level, where we will discuss the work that's underway to make sure that early childhood workers are well compensated and well respected.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, last week our government announced new measures to put more money back in the pockets of Canadians to help them afford the things they need and save for the things they want. Unfortunately, some on the other side of the aisle have the wrong impression about the measures, like the Member of Parliament for Central Okanagan, Nicola, who described it as sending people pennies. Could the Minister please educate the member opposite on what the measures actually mean?
The Honourable Minister, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I would really like to thank my colleague for her question and her hard work for her constituents and the people of Canada. We believe that when Canadians need a helping hand, the government should be there. That's why last week we announced that we're giving Canadians across the country a tax break. That means essentials like groceries, snacks, and kids' clothing and diapers will be tax-free. and working Canadians will get some cash back with the Working Canadians rebate. This will help Canadians across the country, including Canadians in St. John's East and across the great province of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Bravo. The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
While this unserious Prime Minister shakes it off in a vibe session, Montreal burned and the Canadian economy is crippled. I mean, this is the guy who doesn't think about monetary policy. He thinks that budgets balance themselves and that the economy has nothing to do with numbers. And now he says he'll let bankers worry about the economy. That's why Canadians are in a GDP per person decline over the last 2 years. But that's okay, as long as his banker buddies, the elitists, the rich guys like Carbon Tax Carney get paid. Call a carbon tax election now so common sense Conservatives can fix the budget.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I would urge the member opposite to take a look at the GDP revisions from StatsCan. Those were revisions upward that showed real strength of the Canadian economy in our recovery from the COVID recession. I'd also like to urge him and everyone in this House to stop talking Canada down. Inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 10 months. Interest rates have come down 4 times in a row, and we have the lowest debt and deficit in the G7. Now's the time to help Canadians a little bit, and the Conservatives can do that by voting for
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Answer clearly shows the minister's economic illiteracy. As GDP per person has gone down, that means Canadians are getting poorer. And nobody loves this Liberal NDP Prime Minister more than the U.S. He drove our jobs, our investment, our business to the U.S. and now Canada is poorer than Alabama. That's why more than 2 million Canadians are in a food bank in a single month and 1 in 4 Canadians are skipping meals. Instead of letting bankers worry about the economy, call a carbon tax election now so common sense Conservatives can fix the budget and this country.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I say, I really urge the member opposite and all Conservatives to consult those GDP revisions, including their impact on GDP per capita. They will see we have had a strong economic recovery with inflation down and interest rates down. And that's why now is the time to give Canadians a little bit of extra help. With a GST break over the holidays and a rebate for working Canadians. And that is what the Conservatives should support us in offering to Canadians. It's really astonishing to me that they refuse to do that.
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, I will let the bankers worry about the economy. You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy. The budget will balance itself. These are the actual words of the Prime Minister of Canada. Given his complete disinterest in managing the economy, no one should be surprised that GDP per person has declined in 8 of the last 9 quarters. Mr. Speaker, it's time for a common-sense Conservative Prime Minister who will fix the budget, fight inflation, restore the promise of Canada. When will the Prime Minister finally give Canadians a say and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
A working-class Canadian voting for these Conservatives would be like a chicken voting for Colonel Sanders, Mr. Speaker. Think about it. We want to build an economy that works for everybody. When we raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% to cut them for 9 million Canadians in the middle class, they oppose those measures. When we stop sending childcare checks to millionaires to put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, they voted against it. Now we are proposing to cut taxes on household items that are going to help families and workers in this country. Yet again, they oppose it. I urge my colleague to drop the talking points, get over the stickers and caucus with whatever he's about to read, and get on with supporting households.
The honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
I urge the member to get on with Canadians' business and call a carbon tax election. After 9 years, according to the economists, Canada is now poorer than Alabama, the 4th poorest state in the U.S. While this Liberal government drives our economy further and further in the ditch with excessive taxation and regulation, the Canadian economy falls further and further behind while the American economy roars ahead. When will this government get out of the way and allow us to restore the promise of Canada by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
It is like we are playing bingo here, the number of slogans that are being read off when people can't take their eyes off the sheet. Listen to this, is from an article recently. Conservatives talking about their own leader.
And then you go to read the sheet.
If you repeat the slogans, you get rewarded. You are celebrated in front of caucus for being a good cheerleader. The difference between us and them, I don't have to hold...
Order! The Honourable Minister, start from the top this time, please. No interruptions.
Mr. Speaker, the difference between the Liberals and Conservatives in question period, I don't need to have my notes in front of me to actually speak in the House. Mr. Speaker, they are being rewarded in caucus when they repeat the slogans in this House, not when they defend their communities at home. The honourable member won't even admit that his community would be better off receiving money for housing. He stands up and votes against measures once and twice and 3 times to deny tax breaks to families in his community. We are going to be here to support working families. I wish for once the Conservatives would join us.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. On Saturday, the Journal de Montreal asked how Ottawa could hire 43% more public servants and still be so bad at serving its citizens. Imagine, despite hiring 110,000 civil servants, we've had a housing crisis and immigration is a mess, and it's even worse at the CRA. And the answer is that the Liberals spend their time creating new programs to interfere in health, housing, and so on. Do they realize that by meddling in Quebec's affairs, they've lost control of their own responsibilities?
The Honourable Minister.
The Honourable Minister.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk about the vast improvement in government services that have taken place over the last year. We could start with passports. Service improvements have gone across the country, and that's despite the fact that 2 years ago we were delivering 3.4 million passports. This year we're delivering up to 5.7 million passports. You can now get 10-day passports in the territories. There's a new processing centre in BC, and soon you'll be able to get passports online, so you'll never have to wait in line again.
That sounds sketchy.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. The Journal de Montreal doesn't even reveal the full extent of the federal bureaucratic fiasco, because while the public service has ballooned by 43%, the use of subcontractors has also exploded. In addition to a loss of control within its own bureaucracy, resulting in service breakdowns for citizens, there's also a loss of control outside the bureaucracy, resulting in scandals like ArriveCan. And there's never just one minister in charge. How is it possible to be plunged into a fiasco of this magnitude without anyone being held accountable? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Mr. Speaker, one scandal would obviously forbid the Conservative Party or the Bloc to be opposed to the Canadian dental care plan, because more than 13,000 seniors have received care. And this means several thousand of them were able to go to the dentist for the first time in years, or other type of dental specialists. No, they voted against. The Conservatives and Bloc voted against these measures, and unfortunately my colleague knows that. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the weekend, the newspaper headlines read, "Nothing's working at the federal government. It's too big, too fat, and too inefficient." We've been saying this for 9 years, and unfortunately this Liberal government is kept in power by the Bloc Québécois, which supports it and voted in favour of its inefficient spending. It's sad to see Canadians tightening their belts while the Bloc Liberals payers money. When will we have an election so that Quebecers can elect a responsible Conservative government? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Is really sad to hear my Conservative colleagues from Quebec be muzzled by their leader. They are not allowed to visit hundreds of affording housable units that are being built in their ridings. These are being hidden by their leader. That's what irresponsibility is. They're unable to defend their communities because their Conservative leader has banned them from talking about affordable housing units being built in their own riding. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, once again, it shows his incompetency, but this government is abusing its powers and, with its bloc friends, has managed to stay in power despite a minority government. These two accomplices voted $500 billion in appropriations to waste taxpayers' money. More civil servants and less service. That's the Bloc Liberal coalition. Quebecers have had enough. When will an election be held to choose a real Conservative government that will cut the red tape and the taxes? I hope my colleague understood the question. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Incompetency, Mr. Speaker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 affordable housing units. That's all the Conservative leader was able to build across our country throughout his entire mandate. And that's what incompetency is as a definition. We're talking about hundreds of affordable housing units that are built even in his riding. But the bad news is, Mr. Speaker, is that not only is the Conservative leader saying that these units don't exist, but he wants to stop them from being built. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Saint-Germain-Lévis. Here are a few newspaper headlines that appeared over the weekend. End of regime turpitudes. This government is buying time on the backs of taxpayers. Will the Bloc Liberal coalition, which voted twice to keep this government in power, finally understand that it's time to stop feeding this federal bureaucratic monster? The Bloc voted for $500 billion in appropriations. I need a simple answer. When can we have an election so Quebecers can finally choose a common-sense Conservative government, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. My colleague, well, does she know the Haute Couture Boulevard in her riding? And there is a housing project to build 100 units in her riding. So when she talks about incompetency, it should be we were looking at her housing, the opposition leader, who says that these units don't exist. The Minister Dranville and others have visited these housing units. When will she invite her leader to go visit them as well?
The Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, small businesses are the backbone of our communities. They are bouncing back from tough times and gearing up to make this holiday season a success. Restaurants and small businesses in Vaughan and across Canada are counting on a busy Christmas season to kickstart a strong new year. Can the Minister of Small Business tell Canadians how our government is helping small businesses and Canadians through the holiday season?
The Honourable Minister for Small Business.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the member from Vaughan Woodbridge for his tireless advocacy. And I'm glad to say that thanks to our government, Canadians across Canada will get a GST tax break from December 14 to February 15. Restaurants Canada indicated that this is a big win for the restaurant industry. It restores some much-needed hope in the industry, and they're optimistic it will translate to increased spending at local restaurants across the country. This could mean a boost of up to 5% or close to $1 billion in additional revenue. Mr. Speaker, this tax break helps restaurants and small businesses across the country, so let's support local, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan and St. Paul.
The Winnipeg law enforcement community is reeling from a violent incident last night where an officer was stabbed in the neck. Thankfully, he's in stable condition, but this is the reality faced by our brave police officers every single day. In fact, in Toronto, 637 police officers have been injured on the job just this year alone. It's no wonder with a 50% rise in violent crime, which is 200,000 additional violent crime incidents each year compared to 2015. When are the Liberals going to finally wake up and support our police and do something about this?
Here, good question.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what our government does. It supports police doing this dangerous and difficult work across the country. I was briefed on the incidents in Winnipeg. I share the honourable member's relief that the officer is expected to recover. Mr. Speaker, these are exactly the kind of incidents that should make all members of this House support in a nonpartisan way the important work that police forces do in every corner of the country. We've reversed Conservative cuts to border services in the RCMP. We support local and provincial police, and we'll continue to do exactly that.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government often blames the provincial courts, for example, for the crime wave we're seeing across this country. But of course, the provincial courts are governed by the law, and the Liberals changed the law with Bill C-75, which made bail the default for violent repeat offenders. And the results are clear. 116% increase of gun crime in Canada, 50% increase of violent crime, 200,000 additional violent crime incidents each year since 2015 under their watch, Mr. Speaker. How many more people are going to have to get hurt before they realize it's their policies that have caused all this destruction?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Speaker, a couple of points of clarification. First of all, bail reform was asked for 18 months ago. We delivered bail reform. What we asked for subsequently is we asked for provinces, including that member's province, to provide us with data and information. In fact, the province of Manitoba has supplied us with that information. They are working diligently to improve the number of police officers, to improve the number of crowns, to think about how JPs are trained, and to ensure detention facilities are available to receive individuals. We're not seeing that across the country. We're certainly not seeing that in the province of Ontario. That's where the complementary piece of the administration of justice at the provincial level needs to happen.
The honourable member from Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, crime is up. Soft on crime policies like their catch and release bail failures have led to a 50% increase in violent crime. Last night, a police officer in Winnipeg was stabbed in the throat, but thankfully that officer is in stable condition. However, this situation should never have happened in the first place. Liberals' hug-a-thug approach to crime is making an already dangerous job increasingly unsafe and more challenging. How many more police officers and victims must suffer before these Liberals start prioritizing public safety?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
I want to reiterate my support for what the Winnipeg police officers do and what every police officer does around this country to keep all of our communities safe. That's the first point. The second point that I want to reiterate is that we're actually seeing declining numbers of law enforcement officers in municipalities right around the country. I can speak most directly to my own town of Toronto. There are currently 700 fewer officers on the beat in Toronto than there were when the Minister of Defence was the Chief of Police. We need to ensure that municipalities and provinces are stepping up to complement the work we are doing with the criminal code to keep our communities safe. That means officers, that means crowns, that means JPs and detention facilities.
The honourable member from Newmarket, Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, the school food programs are growing in Ontario. With our new agreement with the Ontario government, the National School Food Program will now support kids in Newmarket, Aurora, and across Ontario with healthy meals, building a foundation for their well-being and success. Can the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development share how this program is helping families save money and make sure that kids receive nutritious meals?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Well, great news. Last week, Ontario signed on, and this school year, more than 160,000 kids will receive food at school here in Ontario, thanks to the National School Food Program. This will save an average family of four about $800 in groceries, Mr. Speaker. The president of Ontario's Public School Board said, this funding will have tremendous impact on school communities and family budgets. We're helping kids in school, Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives would cut this.
The honourable member for Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, every day it's more clear that the Liberals' air passenger regulations are letting people down. And now we learn the Canadian Transportation Agency is creeping around online forums trying to catch air passengers who are sharing their experience. So on the one side, we've got the rich airlines backed by the best lawyers and lobbyists, and on the other side, Canadian families struggling to navigate this government's botched complaint process. Will the minister immediately stop government online surveillance of air passengers in Canada?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, our government was the first to protect the rights of passengers starting in 2019. Mr. Speaker, the air passenger protection regulations are there to protect passengers and their families, and we expect all airlines to follow these rules. Mr. Speaker, we're going to be relentless in working with the airlines to ensure, once again, that they are looking after their passengers as well as the families of those passengers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, with $4.7 billion, this government could have cut chronic homelessness across the country in half and had $1.2 billion to spare. Instead, they want to throw it at a pre-election vote-buying scheme read out of Doug Ford's playbook. Worst of all, like always, people with disabilities, unable to work, and already living in poverty are left out entirely. Do people with disabilities mean so little to this government they aren't even trying to buy their votes anymore?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and People with Disabilities.
Mr. Speaker, no other government has done more to support seniors and persons with disabilities than this Liberal government. Mr. Speaker, whether it is through a dental care program that is going to help 9 million Canadians, or the Canada Disability Benefit, or by increasing seniors' pension, Mr. Speaker, the GST-HST tax break is yet another measure to support Canadians' families, Mr. Speaker, and our Working Canadians rebate is going to support more than 18 million working Canadians to get that $250 check in April. This is good news, Mr. Speaker. Let's get it done.
Chers collègues, je voudrais...
Dear colleagues, I wish to draw your attention to the presence in the gallery of the winners of the Social Sciences Award.
Impact Awards 2024 from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council.
Committee right now. We're going to switch to committee in about 15 minutes. Here's the link. Just grab the link, sorry. Mark Miller is going to be testifying in committee. Appreciate that, Chris Johnson, for mentioning
I wish to inform the House that the volume of earpieces will now be reset.
I wish to inform the House that the volume of earpieces will now be reset.
If I may ask colleagues to take their conversations behind the curtains, si je peux inviter mes collègues.
I would invite colleagues to take their conversations outside the House. Behind the curtains, please.
Affaires courantes ordinaires.
Daily routine of business.
Secretary to the Leader of the Government and the House of Commons.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today will be an interesting day in the sense that pursuant to Standing Order 36, bracket A, I have the honour to table in both official languages, Mr. Speaker, the government's responses to 14 petitions. These returns will be tabled in an electronic format, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. The first few links were wrong. Let me just delete those. The last
women, we pause to reflect on the devastating issue of gender-based violence and its impact on individuals, families, and communities right across Canada. Everyone deserves to live free from violence, yet many people across the country experience it every single day because of their gender, gender expression, gender identity, or how others perceive them. This is more than a violation of human rights. It's a painful reality that no one should have to face. While anyone can become a victim of gender-based violence, data shows the most vulnerable groups include Indigenous women and girls, Black and racialized women, immigrant and refugee women, 2S LGBTQI+ people, women with disabilities, and women living in northern, rural, and remote communities. Gender-based violence has had devastating impacts on individuals for far too long, hurting not just individuals but families and entire communities in Canada. For instance, 44% of women in Canada have experienced intimate partner violence at least once since the age of 15. And in 2023, 187 women and girls in Canada were victims of gender-related homicide. That is one woman every 2 days. These are more than statistics. These are real women, women in your community, your colleagues, your sisters, mothers, daughters, each one deserving of justice and a life free from violence. In recognition of this, we launched the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence, commemorating 33 years of dedicated efforts to end gender-based violence in all of its forms. 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence was started by activists at the inaugural Women's Global Leadership Institute in 1991. Since then, the campaign has called on all Canadians to recognize and call out violence when they see it. Speak up. Take action against it. But there is still so much work ahead of us. Today, we stand in solidarity with victims and survivors of gender-based violence and their families, and we commit to doing better. In response, our government launched the federal, provincial, and territorial National Action Plan to end gender-based violence in 2022. This 10-year plan is backed by a $525 million investment to support provinces and territories in addressing this critical issue. Agreements are in place with each province and territory to help them tackle their specific challenges and priorities based on the 5 key areas of the National Action Plan. Later this year, the first annual National Progress Report will be published. It will demonstrate the impacts that these investments have made under the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence. In 2017, the Government of Canada launched its TIME, Canada's strategy to prevent and address gender-based violence. And since its launch, Mr. Speaker, the government has invested more than $800 million and $44 million annually for the following years. This includes $55 million for Indigenous women and 2S LGBTQI+ organizations to offer gender-based violence prevention programs. $30 million for crisis hotlines to help manage the increased call volumes during the pandemic and prevent further escalation of gender-based violence. Collaboration in the fight against gender-based violence goes beyond any single department or organization. It calls on all of us to step up. This year, Indigenous Services Canada worked in collaboration with Indigenous Peoples and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to commit funding for the construction and operation of 19 emergency shelters and 16 transitional homes across Canada. Justice Canada is supporting survivors by strengthening Canada's bail regime to better address intimate partner violence and by improving the law on publication bans. Public safety is strengthening Canada's response to human trafficking through the renewal of the National Strategy to Combat Human Trafficking. The onus to fight gender-based violence cannot just fall on one government or one department. We are taking a holistic, whole-of-government approach to address this issue. It's on all of us to prevent gender-based violence from happening. That's why this year's theme for the 16 Days of Activism is Come Together, Act Now. It highlights how crucial everyone's involvement is in changing the social norms, attitudes, and behaviors that contribute to gender-based violence. True change is only possible when we unite, and that's why coming together and acting now is so important. It's not just about today, but about creating generational change that will last for years to come. It is only possible by continuing to work across all levels of government and with community organizations that will take real action and tackle gender-based violence at its core. We owe it to every victim and survivor to bring them justice, to speak up and take action against gender-based violence in all its forms. Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Speaker.
sorry, but that was rich coming from Liberals after what we saw you guys do at the Status of Women Committee. You guys absolutely ridiculously shut down that committee.
The honourable member.
But anyway, as you guys know, we're going live to another committee in 6 minutes. So here's the link. I've put the link pinned up at the top as well. Appreciate everybody tuning in and subscribing and watching and liking and all that for today. We're going to be live for question period tomorrow as well. It's expected that Trudeau's going to be back in Ottawa. I'm not 100% sure if he's going to be attending question period yet because he doesn't release his itinerary until like the night before. So also just like to shout out to Pokey. Thank you for the super chat. And let's go watch this committee, guys. Liberal MP Mark Miller is going to be testifying on immigration. So I'll put the link one more time in chat. There it is. And let's tune over to that. We got 6 minutes, and we'll be going live there on that link. So cheers, everybody. Hopefully you guys can make it to the committee. And see you guys tomorrow, if not.